I'm going to share my go-to list of resources for teaching history. Hello historian, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Cecilia Tames, your history teacher mentor, and I'm here to make sure that you feel confident and effective as you facilitate learning in your classroom. So let's talk a little bit about history resources, because sometimes finding history resources is like finding or looking for a needle in a haystack, because it's either not adapted to our student age group, it's too detailed and overwhelming, it's outdated, biased, or just not user-friendly. Now, because there are so many history resources we could talk about across a variety of history subjects alone, I'm going to be focusing on tools that I've personally used or I recommend. This will be the first video of a little mini series, so make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss any of the videos in the mini series. Also, be sure to stay until the end of the video so that you know what video is coming up next week. Today's video will be all about unconventional ways that you can use these tools that you may or may not be familiar with. And of course, as a fellow teacher, you know I value your time. So you can find the timestamps for this video down below. If you'd like to explore the resources and support that I offer teachers, be sure to stop by and visit my website, thegameplanedusolutions.com, after you watch this video. Alrighty, so let's do this thingy. Okay, now listen, you should know that teachers sometimes feel all the pressure of using like all these new game apps and platforms, but this is what I recommend. Pick a handful of resources, of platforms that work best for your students. We're not trying to add platforms and extra things to juggle just for the sake of saying that, you know, we're hip and with it. We want to be intentional with the tools that we use in our classroom so that it's not overwhelming to us or our students, and so that they actually facilitate the learning process in our classroom. Now, that being said, let's start with an oldie but a goodie, Nearpod. Now, a lot of teachers are like, Nearpod is so like, meh. And it's true, Nearpod is literally like an extra step versus Google Slides. But I'm pretty sure you know the struggle with students that are absent, just trying to catch them up, trying to reteach the content. It's a huge struggle when our students are absent, because we can send all the workbooks we want and send them the notes and whatever, but nothing will really substitute for our guidance and our instruction and the lesson itself. So another way that I've actually used Nearpod as a facilitation tool is I've sent out these presentations as a means to keep students up to date on what's going on in class. It definitely spares you all the time and trouble of creating like all these workbook copies. You can embed multimedia in there to support your learners. You can add audio clips of your voice giving instructions to students. So overall, it's really like cloning yourself and teaching the student one-on-one. This is a great, easy way to lighten your workload. And the best part is once you have this presentation already done, you can literally tweak it and just use it every year, anytime that you have a student that is out. Now, another super bonus of using Nearpod as a history teaching tool is I like to use Nearpod for either in-person or virtual gallery walks and or station. And you can actually do this by dividing your students up into groups or teams and then assigning each group or each team a particular Nearpod code. I can include a voice clip in there to repeat instructions, because you know how it is with teaching, right? You're going to repeat the instructions 1,000 times. And the idea is you want to be facilitating and not running yourself ragged trying to answer the same question 20 million times. So all these tools within this program actually help you be everywhere at once without being everywhere at once. So one final way I have used Nearpod to facilitate learning and use this as a history tool in my classroom is by using it as a tool for scaffolding and differentiating in a pinch. And so one of the things I would do is actually pre-record the questions, add them to a Nearpod, and have it read aloud to them at their own pace. So personally, Nearpod definitely gets my personal stamp of approval, and I think it's totally worth to add this to your teacher toolkit. Now, another history teaching tool that I wanted to share with you today is Flipgrid. Now, as you know, Flipgrid is a video sharing platform, but this is how you can actually use it for facilitating your classroom management. Okay, so obviously education has changed. And if there's anything we've learned these past 2 years is essentially that we have to be ready to pivot and adapt to different environments. Unfortunately, all the switching back and forth between in-person and online instruction has really taken its toll on our ability to build consistent rapport with our students. So I personally like to think as Flipgrid as a great community building tool. Students can use this to connect, to reflect, to share with you or their classmates in a way that's not intimidating, and it can actually help you transfer your classroom culture back into an in-person setting. So I want you to think of it kind of like a private Facebook/TikTok group, only because it's a video platform. Now, if you've ever taught a day in your life, you know there are some students that instantly shut down when you tell them that they're going to present something in front of the class. So Flipgrid can also come in clutch for you for students that have that apprehension about presenting in front of an audience, but you still want to support the students in building that skill in a way that's not intimidating, that's not going to be forceful, or that's not going to completely eliminate their desire to even try. This is a great tool because they can present to you via video. Now, if this video is giving you some super juicy ideas about how you can reuse these same tools that you may already be using in your class, and you like that we're not necessarily reinventing the entire wheel, be sure to comment "Work smarter, not harder" in the comments below so that I know you're finding value in what I'm sharing. Now, another history teaching tool that I highly recommend is Quizlet and Quiziz. Now, I know these platforms are old news, but here's why I think they're still worth your time as a facilitation tool. So I, like many of you, have students that have special accommodations, or maybe they just need something a little bit more individualized. So what I loved about Quiziz is that I would actually make 2 versions of a Quiziz, for example, and I would assign each student a game code based on their needs, which essentially meant that I could differentiate for my learners without having to split myself into a million pieces. Now, Quizlet, you may know as this online flashcard study set platform, but in my case, one of the ways that I mostly use Quizlet is as a means, as a tool for creating student-friendly study guides. Because I can tell you from experience, if you are providing a study guide with just a list of terms for your students, I can tell you right now that that's not really scaffolding the learning for your students. We have to remember we're teaching kids. And yes, of course, accountability matters, but you have to remember that good study materials yield good results. And not only that, they actually build rapport with your learners who appreciate you being extra and formatting the study guide in a way that's helpful, student-friendly, and accommodating to their needs. Now, Padlet and Poplet are maybe not as widely known or used history teaching tools, but I personally think they're amazing teaching tools to help you facilitate teaching history. Now, if you've never heard of Poplet, essentially it's a site that allows you to create a thinking web. And I believe with the free membership, you're only allowed maybe 1 per day, but I'm going to highly recommend Poplet as a teaching tool, particularly for teachers that teach thematic history classes, or as a scaffold for students who struggle with analyzing big ideas. Now, one of the reasons I really like Poplet is because you can include visual cues within the thinking map. A great way to use Poplet is for connecting ideas within a thematic unit. How does this topic or concept relate to this big idea? Now, if you're teaching a chronological class, you can also challenge students to reflect on the causation of a historical event. Now, if you're wanting to use Poplet as a scaffolding tool, you can actually create a thinking map just with images and terms to kind of prompt student thinking, and students can use these visual cues to help them in replying to LEQ questions, DBQ questions, or as a brainstorming tool before starting on their written responses. Now, speaking of scaffolding and review, Padlet is another history teaching tool that I highly recommend. Now, personally, I prefer using Padlet as a virtual word wall setup. And so what I do is I actually share the link to this Padlet with my students, and they can use it as a means to responding to questions, or sometimes we might use the terms to play review games. So you can rotate to different formats just to keep the engagement up. Variety is the spice of life, but always remembering to stick to just a handful of tools, just what you need for instruction. This way, students will get accustomed to how to use these tools. It'll create familiarity, which will help your classes flow a little bit more seamlessly. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, be sure to comment "work smarter, not harder," so that I know you stuck with me to the end of this video and you found value in what I shared today, and that you'd like to continue learning more about history teaching resources and tools. Also, don't forget to stick around for the next video in our little mini series where we're going to talk about media resources for teaching history. If you need additional support and resources for your classroom, be sure to visit me at thegameplanedusolutions.com, where you will find materials, resources, and opportunities to work with me one-on-one. I want your success. I'm rooting for you. Until next time, class dismissed.